feel like you're being pulled in 1,000 directions? Let's fix that. Download your free rebalancing toolkit and learn how to design an optimized week that lets you feel like you have it all. Get the goods at brilliantbalance.net/have-it-all.
I'm Cherylanne Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. This is episode 71 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. And today we are talking about why it is so hard to move forward after a setback and how you can make sure that you do it anyway. Listen, this is also your PSA that on Sunday, March 10th, we begin daylight savings time in most of the US. This is kind of a quirky tradition we have where we move the clocks around to maximize the hours of daylight that we have during waking hours in the warmer months, and then we turn them back again in the fall. It sounds kind of crazy if you don't live in the US, but we have this little saying to remember it. And it goes spring forward and fall behind, because in the springtime is when we're setting the clocks ahead by an hour, in this case on March 10th. And in the fall, we set them back by an hour, right? So we're falling backwards. Anyhow, don't forget to do that on the 10th. This is your probably one and only PSA reminder for that. But thinking about changing the clocks this coming week got me thinking about that phrase, spring forward or fall behind. And I realized that it really has a lot to do with the way we typically deal with setbacks and disappointments in our lives more broadly, right? It's one of those patterns that certain things catapult us forward, and others have a tendency to drag us back. So setbacks and disappointments are something that often make us feel like we are going to fall behind, like there is absolutely no choice but to move backwards when that setback takes place or that failure occurs, or we don't get what we want out of a particular situation. But what I've learned is with a few steps, we really can use them to spring forward. See what I did there? So let's dig into this today. It's kind of a fun framework. And when you make this mental flip, I think you'll be surprised at what it can do for you. In fact, this exact topic came up in one of my coaching calls for our breakthrough program just a couple of weeks ago. And I told the woman who asked the question, get ready, because in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be recording a podcast on this very subject. So hopefully she is listening today. I think just to level set this, setbacks are going to happen, right? Especially when you start to play bigger. So the kind of women that I love to work with are ones who are ready to step onto a bigger platform, a bigger stage in their lives. That may be that they are gunning for a promotion at work. It might be that there is a piece of community involvement that they really are ready to amplify. It might be that they're ready to do something that's a creative project that's been burning inside of them, but they haven't really brought it to life yet. And so when you start to be in those kinds of arenas and you're taking bigger chances and you're going after bigger things, setbacks happen. Disappointments, failures, rejections especially. So trying to avoid those things is really an exercise in futility. Instead, what we want to do is know what we should do when they occur. Okay, so today we're going to look at a 3-step process for you. And this is designed to get you back on your A game after you've had a setback. So the first thing I would have you do may sound counterintuitive, right? If you were like me, you were raised in a culture that was like, you'll be fine, get up, dust yourself off, keep going, right? Get back in the game. And I think a lot of us think that's really healthy. So as we hear that message as a child, maybe on the soccer field or, we fall off a bike, it ingrains itself in us as the way we should manage any kind of disappointment is, get back on that horse. You're going to get back in the game, do it right away. But I think that skips a really important step. And so the first step I have for you is tend to your wounds, right? When a setback or a disappointment or a failure occurs in our lives, it's like a gash. Something we get thrown off of our game and it's natural. So the first thing to do is lean into that emotion and really feel it. And you might find that you need to be sad or be mad. You might need to cry. Imagine that. You might need to do something active, like go for a run. You may need to call your mom. You may need to eat a giant brownie. I don't know. Whatever makes you feel nurtured, whatever allows you to sit with the feeling of discomfort and disappointment, which, by the way, we don't like very much, which is why we skip over this all the time, right? We make one of two mistakes in this phase of the process. Either we skip it altogether because it is so uncomfortable to feel these feelings, or we stay here. We stay in this space of tending to our wounds and, curling into ourselves and retreating from whatever it was that we were trying to pursue. And neither one of those things works, right? You can't skip it and you can't stay there forever either. If you skip this part, your subconscious keeps calling you back to it, right? Your subconscious knows that you need to feel the pain, but you don't want to do it. So there's often a lot of resistance, okay? Conversely, time is your enemy when it comes to recovering from a setback. And the longer that you wallow in this phase, the less likely you are, frankly, to come back at all. And I like to think about it this way. It's kind of like if you were to take up running as a new athletic pursuit, right? And you get out there and you're like, I started this in May. The weather was perfect. I felt great. I ran every day. I started running longer distances. I started to lose some weight. My clothes fit better, right? And then you get injured. Maybe you get shin splints. Maybe you torque your ankle. Something happens and you stop running. And then you stop working out altogether, and then you never start again. Don't do that, okay? Be sad about the injury. Be mad. Be whatever you have to be. Process the emotions that you're feeling and deal with the physical injury in this case, but then advance to step 2, okay? For simple setbacks, you may only need a short time to tend to your wounds. Something happens in a meeting. Somebody says something to you that you don't like, right? You send out a bunch of emails asking people to meet with you and, nobody responds. You may not need a long time to recover from this. Something like reading a magazine in the bathtub could do it, right? For bigger setbacks, bigger failures, you may need longer. You might need a couple of days. You might need a week or 2, but it's definitely not forever, no matter how substantial that setback is. Okay? Because as you move out of this phase, you have a really important job to do. And it pulls you out of the emotional realm and puts you back in the sort of cognitive mental realm. And the second step is learn the lesson. So honestly, sometimes we're afraid of this one too. We don't want to face the lesson. We don't want to admit that we had anything to do with the situation. But when we do, when we figure out where we had responsibility and we get the chance to extract the lesson from that, it's magic, right? Asking yourself questions like, what is this trying to teach me? What does this experience need to teach me? Is there a pattern here maybe? Is there something that I keep doing that keeps showing up as this same type of setback or failure or lesson? I have another client who is in our boardroom group, which is all women entrepreneurs running pretty substantial businesses. And one of the patterns that she observed that kept causing setbacks was her tendency to hire what she calls stray kittens. She has a giant heart, and her tendency to lean into young women who really she sees potential in, but they don't quite have the talent yet, was so enticing. But then consistently, those women were not able to perform at the level she needed them to inside of her business. So examining that pattern and saying, God, this sucks that I have to fire somebody else. I don't like that. I don't like that this was another failure, quote unquote. Examining the pattern of saying, the thing that's consistent here is I keep hiring women who don't yet have the qualifications because I fall in love with that. right? I fall in love with their story. I want to help and support them. That's what I mean by it's a good example of pattern recognition. Another way we could look at this is to go back to my running example. So remember, it was early May. You fell in love with this new sport. You started running. And at some point, you got injured. So going back to learn the lesson might look like asking yourself questions about what did you potentially do wrong, right? Maybe you ramped up your mileage too quickly. You went from not running any miles to running 5 miles a day, and your body just couldn't take that. Maybe you didn't have good quality running shoes, and it started to really bother your knees or your ankles or whatever because you didn't really put time and energy into choosing the right shoes and making sure that they worked for you. Maybe you're supposed to wear orthotics, but you didn't. Not that I have personal experience with that or anything. Or maybe you were trying to keep up with your teenage daughter and she's out there and she's a cross-country runner and you're trying to be a hero and keep up with her and you weren't ready to run at that speed.
Feel like you're being pulled in 1,000 directions? Let's fix that. Download your free rebalancing toolkit and learn how to design an optimized week that lets you feel like you have it all. Get the goods at brilliantbalance.net/have-it-all.
So whatever it is, as you look back at what led to the injury, you want to learn the lesson because here's why. You really loved running. You'd like to keep doing it. You don't want to give it up permanently and say, oh, well, it must be that if I run, I'll get injured. But how often do we do that? How often do we let that setback become a permanent failure, right? I get injured when I run, therefore I'm not going to run. Instead of kind of diagnosing and trying to find a way through and a way forward. So that's why we often call this failing forward, right? That extracting of the lesson allows us to keep moving in the direction of our dream, but we get to build the learning in that we've had along the way, okay? And these really matter because they lead to that third step. So step 1 was tend to your wounds, can't skip it, right? Step 2 is learn the lesson. Step 3 is get back on your A game. And this is not just get back on the horse, right? Or dust yourself off and get back on the field. This is a little bit of a different approach. So here's what I mean by get back on your A game. I want you to know how you feel when you are at your best. I want you to really think about that in detail. For example, when you are at your best and you know that you are on your A game in life, how do you carry yourself, right? What's your posture like? How does your voice sound when you're really at your best? How do you move through the world? What's your breathing like, right? When you're at your best, how are you breathing? That's a question you may never have thought about. How do you sit? What do you choose to wear when you're feeling like you're really at your best? Other questions might be, what kind of music do you listen to when you're really on your A game? What's the soundtrack of that for you? What do you drink in the morning? What do you eat for lunch? How does your car look, the inside of your car, the outside of your car when you're on your A game? How about your desk? When things are firing on all cylinders, what do you see at your desk? Or inside your handbag? What are you carrying with you? How organized is it? These details matter, okay? Because you're going to need to be able to recreate these externals to get the internal feelings back in line. We're going to really channel your A game. We're going to put you in an environment where you remember what it felt like, what it looked like, what it smelled like, what it tasted like to be on your A game. Okay, rituals really help here because after getting knocked down by one of these setbacks, you're going to want to stay down. And I think about it. I always think about this Oprah phrase when I'm thinking about setbacks. Oprah calls it schlumpadinka mode. You're being a schlumpadinka. And that is just one of the best words ever to me. I have never heard anyone else use it, but it's everything. You can picture what that person is doing, how they're feeling, how they're moving, how they're acting. But one little move in the right direction and you can get yourself out of that mode because action begets action. And you'll start to quickly regain your confidence that you can do things, Okay. You can do things. Now, some people might tell you, well, start very small, do one very small thing. I think if you start strong and you come back roaring instead of like a timid little mouse, then you really come back much more quickly. You will regain momentum much more quickly this way. So the process here is knowing how to summon your A game on command, right? Understand what are the rituals? What is the environment? What is the music you play? What is the way you're moving and dressing and thinking so that when you come back from this setback, you come back on your A game. And you want to rebuild all of those ways of being, getting into the mind and the body and the emotional state of your very best self and using that to bring about the actions that you want to take. Okay, because it doesn't just happen. It's going to require you to do some things that you have not done before. I'm going to tell you another story here. One of our clients was up for a partnership role at a top consulting firm. I'm going to leave a couple of details out here on purpose. And she didn't get it. And she deserved it. And she'd been told she was going to get it. And it was a pretty massive disappointment and setback. Okay. So as we worked with her, the first thing she did was she took 2 weeks and went on an absolutely amazing vacation. Actually, she went on 2 amazing vacations. One that was about decompressing, like I am just going to sit and do nothing but sit in this pool or by this pool and read and relax. And then I'm going to go on a really active, once-in-a-lifetime kind of trip, and that she went on with her husband. That is what tending to your wounds looks like, right? When it's a really big setback at a pretty high level. Second thing she did was debriefed the situation with a number of different trusted advisors. I was one of them. There were others. This was an opportunity to learn the lessons, right? She was getting perspective. She was shaping, okay, what happened here? How did this happen when I did not see it coming? Is there anything I could have done differently? What are my options going forward? And then honestly, and pretty quickly, she got back on offense. And because of that, she landed a partner role at another firm. And she did it within, I'd say, 2 months of the initial news landing for her. This is a perfect example of this process in action, right? Her choices were she could have just gone under and decided that it was never going to happen for her and that there was something wrong with her. That she didn't have the talent, she didn't have the capability. She really wasn't cut out to be a partner because someone had told her that she didn't make it. She could have skipped over tending to her wounds and just put her head down and gone back to work. And then I think she would still be at the original firm in a non-partner role. She could have skipped over extracting the lessons and just stayed in tending to her wounds mode, right? And kicked back and had her performance suffer and, decided that it wasn't worth it anyhow. And she didn't even want to be partner. And we all know people who have made those kinds of choices. We all have been people who have maybe made those kinds of choices where we got stuck in one of those 2 steps, right? Tending to our wounds for too long, not extracting the lessons and really understanding what our options were. But in her case, by getting back on her A game, which we very strategically and carefully did, she was able to land this extraordinary partnership role in another firm. And honestly, get virtually everything and more that she would have had in the original role. So that is what we're looking for. We're looking for the opportunity to spring forward even when a rejection comes. And, as my friend Susie Moore says, rejection is imaginary. Honestly, so is failure. It's so often a story that we're making up in our head that we're being rejected, that we failed. But if we change the frame in a powerful way, you can turn any setback into an opportunity. And I mean any. So when those setbacks come, I want you to decide to spring forward. Follow those 3 steps. Tend to your wounds. Don't skip that step. Extract the lessons. And then, by all means, get back on your A game. It is going to make a difference for you. You're going to find an example probably in the next week where a setback, big or small, could have taken you under. And if you follow this process, you'll see that you are actually moving yourself forward. And I want to hear about it. if that happens for you, if you have a connect the dots moment where you think, oh my goodness, this happened at exactly the right time. This episode landed with me at exactly the right time. Come tell me about it. You can drop it in comments on the show overall. You can put it in comments on this episode on our website. And I would really love to hear those from you. Or you can tell the story in the Brilliant Balance Facebook group. Those are all great places to share how this content is helping you. And I love, love, love to hear those stories. So do that for me, please. The other thing I would love for you to do is join us on Instagram. We are on Instagram at brilliant_balance. It is a party over there. So definitely make sure that you are following us on Instagram and playing along. We have lots of really good, inspiring messages coming your way and some behind the scenes stuff. And speaking of behind the scenes stuff, next week on the podcast, we have a very big moment, very special moment. We're going to have our first guest ever. And I am super excited about this. We have kept the format of the show to just be my voice up until now. And so we are going to start sprinkling in interviews with guests who I think you'll really learn a lot from. I'm curating this initial collection of guests, and I'm really excited about the early roster that's being built here. So we're going to have them, we're going to start about once a month, having the episode involve a guest, and the other 3 will be kind of the way we've been rolling. And I would especially love to hear your feedback on that format. So next week we have Susie Orman-Schnall. Susie is the author of The Balance Project, and she is also the genius behind a series of interviews about balance that were done with high-performing women across a number of industries. A lot of them you will have heard of. She has some pretty big name celebrities in that mix, as well as a lot of really talented women in corporations and entrepreneurship who you may not have heard of. So we'll make sure next week we tell you how to get access to that interview series. And we're going to talk to her about what she learned from that work, as well as her own take on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. So don't miss this. Susie is a doll. You're going to love her. And I'm also asking her about how she became a published author while raising her 3 boys. She's a novelist. And about that time that she spent the weekend literally running up and down a hill at Sarah Blakely's house. Do you know Sarah? She's the founder and CEO of Spanx. So that is a story we all want to hear. Join me next time for that and more. Till then, my friends, let's be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.